Hey, good morning. We have to go at a two times speed today. That's a big Amud, and we are in the middle. We are in the middle on Zion Amud Alpha. We're going to try to get into the Zion Amud base today. So we're up to the Gemara. The Gemara told us, in the narrow lines on Zion Amud Aleph, we are. We just did yesterday. Rabbi Bena said the Kalaisi B'Tar Lishma is Teros and Nasa Sam Chaim, and whoever is doing Torah Shalishma is Nasa Sam Mavet. And the last thing we did quickly was the Taisus here on the top of the page of Zion Amud Aleph, the same Taisus in your Zion Amud Aleph. The Taisus says, but what about? We know that it's good that a person should learn Shalishma because we Torah Shalishma, Bolishma. So Taisus answers, there's two different types of Shalishma. There's the Loilishma, where a person wants to learn in order to become a Rav, in order to become famous. That's not a problem. That's a Shalal Lishma, that'll come Lishma. But the type of Shalal Lishma where a person's learning Lekanter just to make issues, that kind of Shalal Lishma, better he shouldn't be learning at all. Fine. So that was the Gemara that we did yesterday. So now we're up to the Gemara says about 5 lines up or so from the end of the narrow lines. Amalei Rab Yirmiyah Rab Zera, Lacy Mar listening. So Rabbi Yirmiyah said to Rabbi Zera, "No, give a shear, right? Let's hear some, a vertel, a vart, something." He says, "My heart is not feeling well. I can't give the shear." If you remember, we had in brachas, right? In brachas we had it on Chavchet. Something more told us on the bottom of the page that Rabbi Zera said that when he was tired and he was kolishly boy, when Zera's heart was hurting, he couldn't learn. So the over there said he used to go sit outside the base madrash, and he would say, "At least I could say hello to the rabbis when they're coming out of the shir and hear what they're talking about." Yes, over here as well. Rabbi Yirmiyah is asking Zera to give a shir, and Zera said he's not feeling well. So he says to him, "Okay, lema mar milsa da agarata." So okay, don't give us a shir. Give us something about Agarata. Now, why would you be suggesting give me Agarata and not talking about Ian? Because it's a lot easier to hear Agarata than it is to hear Ian. A great example for me of that, and I always think about, is the Gemara in Saita on Mem. Over there, the Gemara says that it was like one of these modern day Shabbatons. So you go to modern day Shabbaton and one of these places, right? They have a few speakers speaking at the same time. They don't have one speaker. Otherwise, everybody's a captive audience. But they want to give choices, so they have two speakers speaking at the same time. Imagine you went to a Shabbaton, one guy speaking on the intricacies of Eruvin, and the other guy speaking about the meaning of life. Right? Who's going to have the big crowd? So that's literally what happened in that Gemara. Moshe Chibra was dashing on halacha, Rav Abbo was dashing on agarata, and the kol alma, the whole crowd, the whole town, shafkua to Rav Chibra, and they all want to go hear a shir from Rav Avo. So agarata is considered easier. Again, there are those many who point out that agarata may be easier, but that's on a very surface level. It is far, far more teeth and much more fundamental, and therefore, while on the surface it may seem simple, it is not. Nevertheless, for our purposes now, Reb Zera is asked to give a vort, give something on agarata, eat something easy. So I'm like, okay, he gives something easy. So so what did Rabbi Yochanan say? What does it mean that a person is like a tree of the field? Is the person a tree of the field? Because it says that from the tree you eat, so you shouldn't cut it down. And it says over there that you are able to cut it down. Okay, so what are we talking about? If we're talking about a Talmud Chacham who's appropriate, then you can eat from him. And you cannot cut him down. But if it's not appropriate, then I say then you could cut him down. All right, so let's back up for a second just to explain what we're talking about. This is the pasuk in the end of what? Parsha Shoftim. The pasuk there is talking about what? Pasuk is talking about a situation of upsharing. No, it's a joke. That's not what it's talking about. But that's what people learn from this. This is the source for one of the sources that people have for upsharing, right? What is the source? The idea is that you see a person like a tree of the field. And what do you know about a tree? Tree has arla. You can't I kid you not, that is how it's understood. However, the Pasuk on the Pasuk is literally the opposite. If you open up the Pasuk, you will see, look at the Ibn Ezra, you're still in a situation of war. Jewish people are going to fight a battle. So the common thing is when you want to go fight a battle, if you have a lot of trees blocking you from being able to attack the enemy, you want to cut down the trees so you should be able to fire at the enemy. So the Torah is telling you, don't cut down the fruit trees. And the pasuk says, "Ki adam eitz hasada, lava mipanecha b'matzor." Is a person a tree that he should be caught up in that the tree should be caught up in the war? You're trying to kill the people who are your enemies. Why are you killing the trees? A fruit tree, and we know you're not allowed to cut a fruit tree, right? That's why you have mechiras chametz on Pesach, right? People have mechiras trees when they want to get rid of a tree because you're not allowed to cut down a tree. A fruit tree? What did he do wrong? So the pashup shot of this pasuk is a person is not compared to a tree. That's the pashup shot, and that's why you say you're not allowed to cut down the tree. You could cut down the enemies whoever you're fighting. For our purposes now, we're not dealing with the pashup shot. We're dealing with, as we said, it becomes a source for upsharing. Now you understand how we get it. But we are actually going to compare the person to a tree. Take the context out and just look at the pasuk. A person is, and it sounds like what? A tree of the field. So, okay, but think a person is a tree of the field. Then what do we mean? What do you mean? How do you compare a person to a tree? Because it says that you could be able to eat from it, and therefore you shouldn't cut it down, treat it appropriately. But yet the pasuk says also, again, the pasuk shot is the pasuk is talking about when you have an eitz, which is not an eitz ma'achahu, a tree that's not an eitz ma'achahu, it's not a fruit tree. That tree you're allowed to cut down. So sounds like certain trees you can cut down, certain trees you cannot. And we're comparing a human being to a tree. Therefore, what is our limud? Our limud is Ibn Talmud Chacham Hagen, who, if he's a serious person, he's a good person, he's a nice person. So then that's what you eat from. That's like a fruit tree. That you eat from, that you do not cut down. But if that person is not like that, in other words, he's like a person like a tree. But what kind of a tree? He's not a fruit tree. He's a tree that doesn't give forth any fruit. He's a tree that's empty. So he's not a hagun. He's not a nice person. He's not a good person. So I said that you should get rid of that. You should destroy. In other words, that you shouldn't be learning from that. You shouldn't be dealing with. Let's look at Taisvis. Tais says, again, counting how many parishes there are of Taisvis in Taanit, parish. Limud lefanav. If he's an appropriate person, then you can learn by him. Right? Don't cut him away. Don't leave him. Klemar, loiti pardon me, man. Don't leave him. To go to learn by another Rebbe. But if he's not appropriate, then don't learn by him. Frank, I don't understand. We know the Gemara Chagiga says that Rabbi Meir learned by Acher, and if Acher is not an appropriate person, as we imagine he's not, that's why he's called Acher. We don't call him even by his name, Elisha ben Avuya, because he's a bad guy. So how could Rabbi Meir learn by him? So Taisa is channeling the Gemara there in Chagiga, Tazvav. So Taisa says, Hainu dafka Talmud Chacham. That's about a Talmud Chacham specifically. Rabbi Meir Yachalum on the fun of Levisha Lo Yilma Mimaitzav. He knows what to learn from him, what not to learn from him. Aval Meir Talmud Chacham. But if you're not Mamash Talmud Chacham, then you don't have permission to learn from him. That's what the Gemara there in Chagiga says. How could Rabbi Meir do it? So the Gemara over there is comparing it to a remind, and the Gemara says that he was able to eat the seeds, the nice, and spit out the chaff. That's Rabbi Meir's ability. Not everybody has that ability. Number one. Number two, notice how the Gemara here is using Talmud Chacham as already the way we use it, not how the Gemara uses it. Talmud Chacham, the way the Gemara uses it, proves that the Gemara Brachas. If you remember, in Paragraph, we say a Talmud Chacham is, in the Gemara's time, is not a Chacham. A Chacham is the high level. A Talmud Chacham, he's a student of a Chacham, he's a low level. But already today, when you say somebody, oh, he's a big Talmud Chacham, we've already changed the meaning. You see already in Taisus, already the meaning has changed. We don't say Talmud Chacham is a student of a Chacham, but no, a Talmud Chacham is a real deal. All right. Now, one other point we should say is more there. Chagiga tells us on Tezvav. The Gemara says on Pasuk says, "Ki right? But Sifsei Kain, a Kain has to know this pasuk, right? Kim Sifsei Kain Yishmu Das Torah Yivakshim Piu, says the Gemara. If the Talmud Chacham is an appropriate person, then Torah Yivakshim Piu. But if not, then you don't have anything to do with him. That's again chat on this day. So we have a Gemara like this later on. Taanit, you turn the page to Chav Dalet. Over there, the Gemara top of Chav Dalet, the Gemara at the bottom of the Chav Gimel and Beis says, Rabbi Yosi bar Oven Havishchich Kamed Rabbi Yosi the Min Yukras. Rabbi Yosi bar Oven, he was Amira. He used to learn by Rabbi Yosi the Min Yukras. Shav gave us the Kamed of Ashi. Look at the top of the page of Chav Dalet. So he left him to go study. Rabbi Yosi bar Oven left him to go study at Rav Ashi. And the Gemara says, so what happened? The Gemara says over here at the top of the page that he comes to the Shir of Rashi and he says something. Rashi says the business Rabbi Yossi bar Oven who says that. So Amar Anani who says I'm Rabbi Yossi bar Oven. Amar Lev Lav Kamed Rabbi Yossi the Min Yukras Hava Shriach Amar. He says, but don't. I heard that you learned by what do you call it? By Rabbi Yossi the Min Yukras. Every Rebbe knows the hack of who learns by who. Like the good guy, everyone knows, right? This is by my shir. Why I heard you learn by Rabbi Yossi the Min Yukras. Why are you here? So what did he say to him? On Marley. So he says, hey, you're right. That's what I learned. So I'm like, my time of Shav came out. Why did you leave him? I mean, I wanted you to come to my shir, but why did you leave him? Why did you come to me? I'm like, right? He's not having any mercy on his family. How's he going to have mercy on me? We don't have time to go into the story now. It's very delicious. We'll do that later. But for now, what do you see? He saw his Rebbe, Rabbi is not acting appropriately. The Gemara is unbelievable Gemara there. He left. That's exactly what we're saying here. If the Rebbe is not an appropriate person, leave. If he's an appropriate person, stay. Says Taisvis, if you're a serious Talmud Chacham, in the current sense of the word, then you can stay. If you're a mayor, you can handle Acher. All right, Zot Gemara. We have a ton to do. So what does the Gemara say now? Says the Gemara, we are now at the wide lines. Yeah, finally. Yeah, Amar Rabbi Chama. Rabbi Chanina, Mai Tachsev Barzel Barzel Yachad, right? If Ish Yachad from area, it's a passing in Mishlei. What do you mean? Barzel Yachad is like sharpening, right? So you know, ever sharpen a knife? I know they have fancy people have knife sharpeners that come to your house and they sharpen all your knives. But in the old days, the way I remember, you had a knife sharpener in your house, right? It was like a piece of metal, and you would take the knife and you would go like that to the knife, and it would become sharp against the metal. Why? That's what the pasuk says. You become sharp when you take the iron against each other. That's how it used to work. Yeah, and then the pasuk continues. It says, and a person with another person can create sharpness. In other words, by a person arguing with somebody else, you can create a sharpness in the dialogue. This teaches you, just like when it comes to iron, when it comes to a knife, when it comes to things that are sharp, one thing against another one will sharpen both. So too, if you have two Talmidei Chachamim, when they're learning together, they're going to be mechad one another in halacha. I literally discussed this Gemara at a wedding a few nights ago, where somebody was saying that to explain why this Gemara was explaining that Moshe did most of his learning alone, not a charusa. So the person explained to me that this is a situation where if you have a Messiah, and if your mind is so powerful that literally the old value is only what to have somebody who's going to come and challenge you, then you learn alone. But if you have a Messiah in terms of how to learn, and you know how to approach all the different sugyas, and you are sharp enough that you're able to, just need somebody else who literally can sharpen you in terms of they have some ability, but just to be babysitting, just to be helping somebody who's not going to be anywhere near the level, then that's a waste of time. Yeah, but generally, for other people who are not like Ramesh or regular people, generally Chavrusa Shabs are a wonderful thing. Yeah, so Zot Gemara. So Amar Rabba Bar Bar Chana. Why is the Torah compared to a fire? Hashem says, are my words like fire? This also teaches you something else about this topic about needing two people together to study. Just like a fire doesn't light up by itself. You ever see a fire go light up by itself? No. So too, when it comes to learning Torah, it's not Meskayim with just one person alone. You need to have two people. This is what it means. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said, "May the siv cherv alabadin v'noyalu." What does it mean in the pasuk? The pasuk tells us in Yirmiyah that the cherv, the sword, is going to go on the boasters, the fools. Cherv al shenin sham bin Talmidei Chacham is obviously a lashon tzarginor. It's a sword that's going to go on the Jewish people, on the Talmidei Chachamim. She'oiskim bad b'vad b'Torah. That here we're not saying boasters, but bad b'vad, meaning they're learning separately. They're not learning with chavrusa shaf. They're learning alone. So when you're going to learn alone, it's a situation where you're not going to be really increasing the ability that you have to become a serious Talmid Chacham. You'll be essentially a fool. But like mid tafshin, you're going to mamish become a tippish. That's what Rashi over here says. That's what it means. V'noyal was a fool. That's the targum. And we literally have a pasuk like this. Shenema v'noyalu, right? That will become fools. The pasuk says, "Cher v'alaban v'noyal," you'll mamish be fools. Why fools? Because you learned alone. You didn't have anybody challenge your suppositions. You didn't have anybody challenge your conclusions. Say that's foolish. What about that Gemara? You're more likely to be susceptible to mistakes, right? V'loy ella shechaitin. Right? It's mamish. It's written that they will sin. Where is it written that they're going to sin? Here it talks about Vanayla to be fools. We have a pasuk right in Parashat Ba'alaischa, right by when Miriam and Aaron talk about the Isha Kushas Asher Lakach. You talk about the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu is not acting in a way that they thought was appropriate with his wife. So the pasuk over there says that Miriam was mitzeras kasholeg. So Aaron is talking to Moshe and asking to daven for Miriam, and what does he say to him? Asher noy amlu b'asher chatanu, right? Al nokti kames, right? Asher v'seisem merechan imoy. Right, so he says to Moshe Rabbeinu, we sinned, we were fools, and we sinned. So it's not only a situation if you don't learn alone. I'm sorry that if you learn alone, that you're going to be a fool, but you also come to sin. You also mamish make serious mistakes. Another pasuk that show you that you can mamish become seriously foolish with great consequences. The pasuk in Yeshaya, the pasuk says, "Ne'alu sorry tzayan." This was Mitzrayim, right? And over there, some of the various different cities in Egypt and all the mistakes that they made, and they mamish caused Egypt to go wrong. So the connection is to us that we're talking about a situation where somebody's learning alone. It's not merely that he's a fool. It's not merely that he doesn't fully get it, but he can mamish make serious mistakes and cause grave consequences. Okay. So the Gemara, the Amr of Nachman. Bar Yitzchak, lo manim shel divrei Torah ka'etz. Why is the Torah compared to a piece of wood? Again, what do we have? We've seen already. We've already seen that the Torah, that the Gemara earlier told us, Shneimar eitz chaim hi l'machazikim ba. Right, the Torah is considered a tree of life. Right, and we had already what we talked already before about the Torah is compared to Aish, which we assume it's how you light a fire. You can light a fire with twigs, light a fire with racks. Um, so now we're gonna again keep on going on this theme that the Torah is comparable to wood. How? Again, the same place that we used earlier. How does it work by a fire? I'm not an expert, but Eagle Scouts, if anybody's an Eagle Scout, you know that when you're going to light a fire, right, what's going to light easier is not the big log. Right, it's going to light a fire is a small twig. And eventually, the more small twigs you have will light the big log. But you don't light the big log first. So that's the same thing is true here. That what? Just like a small twig is going to end up being able to light the big log. So after so too the Talmidei Chachamim, the small ones, they'll be able to sharpen up and light up the bigger ones. And this becomes a very famous line. I learned a lot from my Rabbi. And I learned a lot, even more, from my Chaverim. But from my students, I learned the most. Why? Because as Rashi says, that they're always asking kashas. Many times they're klutz kashas, but sometimes they're questions that you never thought of before, and you have to come up with an answer to be able to explain it. So that's why you get the biggest sharpening of the mind from the Talmidim. Yeah. So that's how we compare now again the Torah to wood. Zaktimar. Ram Chanina bar Papa. Rami, Rabbi Bar Papa asked the following question. Ksiv, Likrat Simei Hesoyu Mayim. Right, Likrat Sameh, to go greet somebody who's thirsty, go bring him water. Uksiv, we have another pasuk, a very famous pasuk, Hay Kol Sameh L'chula Mayim. Right, anybody who's thirsty should go for water. So what do you mean? It sounds a stira. On the one hand, it sounds like you bring water to the thirsty person. On the other hand, it sounds like what? That the thirsty person should come go search for the water. So which one is it? Says the Gemara, Im Talmud Hagunhu. If he's an appropriate studier, he's an appropriate student, so then the Likras Sameh Hasoyim, go greet this thirsty person and go bring him water. Right? It's the Rebbe's job, if he has appropriate students, to seek them out, to encourage them, to help them in the path of learning. But if he's not an appropriate type of a student, so then so let the thirsty one, let the student come look for the water. Let him work harder. Don't search him out. It's a good lesson in life. Right? It's a good lesson in life. Yeah. It's a good lesson in life to lots of people in different situations. Sometimes it is best not to go running around after people. Yeah, so Zot the Gemara. Rabbi Chanina Bar Chama Rami. Rabbi Chanina Bar Chama has another question. What's his question? Siv Yafutzu Ma'inasecha Achutza. Right? It should be bursting forth, right? Ma'inasecha, your well springs should go bursting forth, going to the outside. Meaning, it sounds like it should be getting out there. We have another pasuk you right next to it over there in Mishlei. Sounds like it should be just for you alone. So which one is it? Are we looking to encourage a person's study to be getting out there, going everywhere, or just for you alone? So it says the Gemara in Talmud Hagano, if it's a good student, so then let the wellsprings get out there. In other words, go out after the person, seek the person, push. But if not, then just stay alone and just focus on yourself. And I remember hearing a version of this that depending on the situation, that's how you see that the sort of Gedolei Yisrael acted in terms of focusing more inwardly or more outwardly, depending on the kind of generation. Fine. It would be literally against the whole kiruv idea, right? Because the whole kiruv basis is that when the generation is not worthy, instead of you l'chol levadecha, that's exactly the time that you go out there. So we'll be able to make an easy differentiation and saying, well, it depends on the kind of situation of why they're not engaged. The reason they're not engaged is because they're lekanter, they're egomaniacs and the like, megalomaniacs. Okay, maybe that's the situation. You look all about that. There's a situation with the a situation where they have no idea what's going on. So that's not a situation where you should be just doing it for yourself, but you should be going out there. And I think that's the basic understanding of why generations in the last 50 years, let's say in the West, where the new generation has no interest, we don't say, okay, well, just sit down and study for yourself. No, go out there harder. But in a generation, let's say during the Maskilic eras or whatever, people were running away. So the rabbis didn't run after them. They just simply stayed put to go focus inwardly and remain expert. Yeah. So something more. Rabbi Chanina Bar Idi. Right? Rabbi Chanina Bar Idi. So what did he say? Why is Torah compared to water? We just had the pasuk. Right? Everyone's thirsty should come for the water. Right? What are you thirsty for? Thirsty for water. What is water? Water is Torah. Just like what gravity, right? If you have water, water's on a hill. Right? What's going to happen to the water? It's going to be drawn down, right? It's by just simple gravity. So the Torah is not going to be sustained unless you have somebody who is modest, who is humble. Somebody who's an egotistical person is not going to be able to learn the Torah because he's thinking far too much about himself. Yeah, so let's look at the Taisvas. The Taisvas says, after the Torah, we have a Gemara in Erevin, which is very similar. Pirish Ketzem, I'm sorry, Parak Ketzem Avrin. I'm just thinking Pirish every time I see a pay. Yeah, but this is Parakeh of Aaron. The Taisa says, Loi Bashamayimi. The Pasuk says in Parash Nitzavim, the Torah is not in the heavens. And it's not on the other, it's not on the other side of the oceans. You're not going to find Torah by somebody who holds himself up there like the heavens, like he's such a, amazing person. So the other Gemara Darshans further, we're going to actually use this Gemara later on when we get to Chaf Aleph. Right, the Gemara later on in Chaf Aleph is going to tell us about the mice of Ilfa. Yeah, we're going to talk about this Gemara in Erevin then, because we'll get a sneak preview now. So the Gemara tells us there in Erevin that we're not going to find the Torah by somebody who's such a grandiose person, such an egotistical person that he thinks he's mamish in the heavens. But you're not going to find the Torah. What do you mean, you're not going to find the Torah about the Seichim are going traveling. They're world travelers. They have to go here, they have to go there. I'm not saying for pleasure. Forget that. For business. They have to travel all over the world. You're not going to find Torah by such a person. Why? They're too busy traveling all over the world. Yeah. So the Safar, right? Somebody who has a sefer is not going to be holding a sword, right? Somebody who has a sword is not going to be holding a sefer. I'm resisting now discussing this topic. It's a fantastically interesting one, and especially relevant today with regards to certain people being drafted into the army. Safar, a sefer, right? A sword and the sefer. This is a very interesting thing, but we can't stop. Then he says, and over there we get also, the Gemara says that you don't find the Torah by merchants, right? By the people who are busy doing business. They're busy, always been doing business. They always have a deal. They're hacking. You don't find Torah by such people. And that's why it's going to be relevant to Ilfa. Ilfa went on the big ships. He became a merchant, and whether or not he still had Torah. And we're going to talk then. I don't want to give so much sneak preview, so we won't talk more about it. But just finish this Taisvis. Yeah. So Taisus finishes up. We'll talk about the Chaya Adam. Yeah, talk about some introduction. We'll talk about Human Gross introductions. A lot of things to talk about when we get to Chav Aleph. Yeah. So just finish the Taisus. So Taisus says one of the things that Gemara says you don't find it. You don't find the Torah by astrologin. What is astrologin? An astrologer. But that's not really what we mean. That really what we mean is an astronomer. But they didn't have that kind of distinction then, right? We know today an astrologer is a tarot cards. They're going to tell you your future. You're a Taurus. Oh, this means blah blah blah. Whatever. Okay, this is all a joke. Even if some of the Rishonim took it very seriously, we know. I don't know. We can't get into it. It's a whole topic. We can't go. You look in the end of Shabbos, and base. It's a whole thing. We can't go into it. But for our purposes now, right? A Mazel Yisrael. It's a huge topic. We really, really cannot go to do it. No. And we're going to hold ourselves back, not do it. Yeah. But if you look at Taisus, I just want to finish this Taisus because I want to tell you this is where I think a legend comes from. There's a legend. Yeah. And everyone heard of this legend. I think it comes from this idea, from this Taisus, from that Gemara name. You're not going to find Torah about the astronomers? Why not? Because they're so busy with it. You ever see an astronomer? You have to read Gulliver's Travels. You understand what I mean? They're looking at the telescopes. They're always mamish checking the sky, like the orbits. Mamish are busy, very busy. Today, you think that they've finished? They know all the things about all the constellations? No, there's billions of more that they can find. So they're very busy. They're very busy. They have all the data coming in, the checking. Yeah, with AI, maybe it'll make it easier for them, but I'm sure not. They're going to find even more things to look for. Yeah. So the Gemara says you don't find Torah about astronomers. They're too busy looking at the moon and the skies and everything. So the Gemara says, those are looking at the stars. But the Gemara, they ask Shmuel, but aren't you a big astronomer? Or and those days astrologer? Right? Everyone knows we just did the Gemara in Parakaraya. What did the Gemara tell us about Shmuel? Shvile de Nerdo. Right? The streets of Nerdo, like the heavens. I mean, the same way you know exactly where your home is, you know what a market is, you know what a base medrash is. Shmuel says that's what the pathways of heaven. Just the one thing he didn't know was the comet that comes every 70 years, the Gemara said, right? But the regular way astronomy, he knows perfect. He's such a good astronomer. Says Taisvez. So the Gemara they said, they asked him, how could you be such a Shmuel? You're such a Talmid Chacham, and yet you don't we say that there's no Torah about astronomers? So my little Tasty Lee, right? It's a great line you find in Shas. Tasty Lee, right? The Shabbos, Abaya when he made a siyum, tastily because I make siyum, or tastily because I eat the shalasudas, right? Different things that people say tastily because I'm such a great guy, I do whatever. So Shmuel says, no, tastily that what? I don't look at the stars. That'll be either the nafkalamaya, or as the side puts it, lebesamayim. Pirish says tastily lahatul mayim. The only time I ever look at astronomy is when I'm about to go into the bathroom. When you have a telescope in the bathroom, I don't know, but. What I mean to say, and everyone knows the legend, the Gra, right, came up with all these mathematical theorems. Where? In the bathroom. Right? This is, I believe, the source for that kind of an idea. Okay, back to the Gemara. We have to run. Says the Gemara, why is the Torah compared to three different kinds of liquids? Water, wine, and milk. We have a pasuk that tells us compared to water. Every thirsty person should go to the water. They have another pasuk that says that what you're going to go buy stuff and you're not going to be able to get it without money. What? Yain v'chalav. So we're going to teach you as follows. What are these three liquids? Water, wine, and milk. What do they have in common? Just like these three liquids, they're only going to be able to survive in very low-class casks. You cannot keep wine in a nice, golden cask, as we're going to see in a second. You have to keep it in a wooden cask. The same is true with regards to water and milk. Again, I'm not a scientist. I don't know if this is exactly true, but certainly in the case of wine, I know that the casks in wineries are always wood. They don't make them out of metal. Wine, shouldn't say they don't. Maybe they do. I have no idea. But in general, my understanding is they keep a lot of these things in wooden casks. Why wooden casks? So we're going to have to see. Yeah. So after return, who is the Torah going to be kept up with? Who's the Torah going to have a kiyumai? Only somebody who is a humble person can. I'm related. In the case of B'Shu B'Chananya, an amazing Gemara. We spoke about this Gemara on Shabbos Day a couple of years ago. This is an unbelievable Gemara. We don't have time to get into that now. Just a little bit. The Gemara tells us what happened. So the daughter of the Kesar, the daughter of the Caesar, spoke to B'Shu B'Chananya. B'Shu B'Chananya, the unbelievable B'Shu B'Chananya. This is Rabbi Shua Ben Horkin. This is Rabbi Shua, the student of Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai. So she said to him as follows: how could it be that such a genius like yourself is in such a disgusting vessel? In other words, Rabbi Shua ben wasn't on the top 10 in the magazines about the handsome rabbis, right? He was very ugly. Literally, the Gemara says he was very ugly, not comely, homely. He looked terrible. Says the Gemara, Amalev. So he says to her, Rabbi Shua ben doesn't take this lightly. He responds, Amarla. He says to Ravich, Rami Chamra ben Mine de Parachra says, does your father keep the wine in the clay and the wooden and the junky vessels? Amarle. So Amarle, Ella b'mai near me. So she says, oh yes, but like what should he keep him in? Right? So Amarla, Atun de Chashivtu, Ramu b'mayne de Ava v'chaspa. You're such chashiv people, you're the emperor, the Caesar, whatever, the governor. Put your wine in golden casks, in silver. So Azlava Amrle Lavua, Rami L'chamer b'mani de Dava v'chaspa v'takef. She said to her father, do it. So he puts the wine in the golden and the silver casks. Every time if it becomes disgusting, it becomes spoiled. It becomes spoiled. The wine. So Asava Amrle. So basically, they came in and they tell the king, this is what happened. So Amar Labarti says to his daughter, Man Amalaf, who told you to do this? This is crazy what you did. So Haki Amar B'Shu B'Chananya. This is what B'Shu B'Chananya told me to do. Kirua. So he calls B'Shu B'Chananya. Right? Amar La. He says to him, why do you say to my daughter to put the wine in the gold and silver casks? Amar La. The way she said it to me, I said it to her. She said, I'm so ugly. So how can I be the retainer of the Torah? So I said to her, because that's the only way to keep it. And I said, see it, take the wine, put it in the fancy cask, see what happens. And guess what? She did. It didn't happen so nice. So it says the Gemara that the Caesar guy, the governor, says to Sheba Chanani, Shapir de Gemiri, but don't you have some really handsome people who are seriously super learned? As we turn the page now to Zion on the base. Says the Sheba Chanani, unbelievable lie. And you have a Sanu, if they were uglier, they have a Gemiri, they would be more learned. Meaning that, as Rashi points out, it's impossible for somebody who's really good looking not to have an ounce of something, a shemetz, an ebis that goes into his head. And since you're going to have something, that's by definition going to take you away from Torah to some degree or another. Another comparisons. Obviously, we didn't prove anything about milk. We didn't prove anything about anything. We just focused on wine. We didn't talk about milk, right? We didn't talk about water. But nevertheless, it goes. The point is made clear. Yeah. So nothing more. Another pshat. Mash lesha mashkan alalu. Just like these three liquids, they can become ruined, right? If they're not taken care of, if they're not watched, right? In a sense, as Rashi points out, more than like oil or for example, honey. Oil and honey are much thicker drinks. So if something gets into them, so you remove the top layer, and you still have the rest of it be very good, says Rashi. But by wine and water, milk, they're a lighter drink. Something gets into it, it can really destroy the whole thing. You can't just take out a layer of it. So after we turn mishtaq and el b'hesach Torah is also going to be lost by hesach hadas. If somebody's not focused on his learning, it's going to be easily lost. Yeah, this is a problem. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Right. The Gemara Psachim tells us, right, you have to know about it. You have to go over it, right? It became a song. What's the song? Yeah, everybody knows the song, right? That a person should be taking his learning in his hands. No, what's the song? No, I'm forgetting right now myself. I'm forgetting the Gemara. Yeah, this is a proof, right? The Hezek Hadas that you forget when you have Hezek Hadas. So that's the Gemara. No, no, huh? You're saying the Gemara is like water, it's not like. We're not talking about not like milk. We're talking. No, honey and oil. We're saying it's not. They're not comparable, right? Yeah, like water, like wine, or like milk. Which, if you don't take care of those, it'll go spoil. So to a third. Oh, okay. The way it goes like this. Um, uh, no, this is gonna kill me. Okay. All right, we'll have to come back to this in a minute. Still not in my head. All right. Okay. Amar Chama. Rabbi Chanina Zati Mar Gadol Yom HaGeshamim. Yom Shenivu Shemayim Bar. It's the day of rain. When it rains is like it's so great. Like remember we had these Gemaras already before. Right? We had the top of Zion Amnal. We had Gadol Yom HaGeshamim, right? Got some Mason, like the Yom Shenivu Torah, all that. So over here also we have. Yeah. So we say over here Gadol Yom HaGeshamim Yom Shenivu Shemayim Bar. The day when it rains is so great, like when it was creation of the world. Right? Like the rain is coming down from the heavens. Tiftach eretz v'yifru yesha u'tzedakah tatzmiach yachad. Ani Hashem berosiv. So Taisus explains over here on the pasuk again in one of these Pirish Taisus in that if you look at the pasuk, it sounds like we're talking about the Shemayim and the Eretz, right? Harifu Shemayim, right? Eretz, Yifru, right? It's talking about, it sounds like the heavens and the earth. It's also talking about rain. Harifu Shemayim Imal, right? Ushrakim Yizlu Tzedek, right? They're gonna be dropping rain. So we're talking about heavens and earth, and we're talking about the rain. So the end of the pasuk is Ani Hashem Barosim, I am a God who created this. So if it would have said Ani Hashem, it says it would have said Bara'am, if I would have created them, the barasim, then it would be talking about the Shemayim and the Aretz. But Ani Hashem barasim means that the pasuk is only talking about the rain, and we're talking about the rain, yet talking about the Shemayim and the Aretz in the same context. It sounds like we're comparing the creation of the world to the bringing of the rain, and therefore, as the Gemara says, barasim loy nemar ela barasiv, right? So therefore, the pasuk is talking about the rain. That the rain is like the creation of the heavens and the earth. Fine, let's just do one another couple lines. Rav Aisha Gadol Yom HaGesham Shafil Yeshua Par V'Ravabai. Rav Aisha says that the day of rain, right, when it rains, it's so great. Shafilu Yeshua Par V'Ravabai. Even the salvation, right, is going to grow within it. Shneimar Tiftach Eretz V'Yifru Yesha. Again, another play on this pasuk that when the earth is open, there will be salvation, will grow. The Jewish people get rain, right? Only if they're. It sounds like even broader. Even rain only comes when the sins of the Jewish people are forgiven. Shneimar, Ratzisa Hashem Artzecha, right? Shavta Shavus Yaakov, Nosis Oven Amcha Kisisa Kol Chatosim Sela. Right? Hashem is covered or carrying the sin, or the sin is covered, and that is sort of connected to Ratzis Hashem Artzach, when Hashem is wanting to land. In other words, when there'll be rain. And that's connected to Noisei Oven, when the sin is going to, or Kishisa Kol Chatosam, when there's going to be less sin. Yeah, all right, we have to really stop over here. Okay.